Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. One of the main themes in the Torah is the story of the Jewish people going down to Egypt, living there for a while, prospering, suffering, being miraculously redeemed, and their journeys through the desert on the way to the promised land. Now, on a simple level, when we learn this, it's history. It's something that happened thousands of years ago. But on a deeper level, on a more personal level, on a Kabbalistic level, it's really the story of each and every one of our souls as they descend to this world and the journeys that the soul goes through until it reaches its ultimate promised land. So on a Kabbalistic level, it's all about our lives. There's nobody better to teach the journeys of the soul on a Kabbalistic level than my good friend, Rabbi Dubov. Rabbi Dubov, thank you for this, and we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Masinta. I do recall once seeing an advert in an Israeli newspaper, which had a full page with the words Yamin, Smol, Yamin, Smol, Yamin, Smol, which means right, left, right, left, right, left. And at the bottom of the page, it just had two words, Aval Le'an. But where are you going? We're all going in life. We're busy. We're going. We're going this. We're running. But where are you running? Tonight, let's go on a Kabbalistic journey. Let's go on an inward-bound journey. Let's go on a journey to understand where we're going. This week's Parsha is in fact two sedras put together, the Parsha of Matos and Massei. And Massei, the second of those two, begins with the words, Eile Massei b'nei Yisrael, these are the journeys of the children of Israel, Asher yotzu me'eretz Mitzrayim l'tzivoisam, that went out of the land of Egypt with their hosts, biyad Moshe v'Aaron, in the hand of Moshe and Aharon. There is an obvious question. Massei, which means journeys, is a plural. The actual journey that they went out of Egypt was a singular journey. So why does the verse grammatically say these are the journeys that the Jewish people went out of Egypt? It should have said that when the Jewish people went out of Egypt, they went on many journeys. And the idea here is that every single one of these journeys in the desert, and there were 42 in total, are all part of the Exodus of Egypt. And what we're going to do, like in everything in Torah, Torah is not just a history book, but Torah is hoira b'chaim. Torah is a directive in our lives. Torah is chayenu. It's literally our lives, v'orach yameinu, and the length of our days. And it's from the word hoira, which means it's an instruction. It's God's instruction to mankind. And whilst we are traveling in our personal odyssey, in our personal journey through life, we do need direction. Aval la'an, where are we going? So let's start with a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov taught that these 42 journeys that the Jewish people traveled through the desert in fact are reflected in the journey of every single individual in life. From the moment we're born to the moment we die, we should undergo, and we do undergo, 42 journeys. What are these journeys? And what is their purpose? And in fact, one may ask the same thing about the Jewish people journeying in the desert. The fact is they were supposed to have immediately going out of Egypt, standing at Sinai, going towards the land of Israel, and immediately entering. It's only because of the sad episode of the spies that there was a decree that they remain for 40 years in this wilderness. And in those 40 years, there were 42 journeys. So if you want, it was a secondary position to the original intent. And the Torah goes and details the names of these places and says that they encamped there and they traveled from there. And of course, when they did that, they set up the Mishkan, the tabernacle, as the nucleus of the Jewish encampment in every single place. And sometimes they were in a place for a short while, sometimes for a long while. How does this reflect itself in our personal lives? Because one of the things about Torah, and most importantly about learning Kabbalah, Pnimius HaTorah, the inner dimension of the Torah, is not that it should remain an abstract science, but rather it needs to be thoroughly applied to the human and contemporary condition. So let's go back to Egypt. That's a great place to start because that's where we went out of. What was Egypt? The Torah tells us and describes Egypt as ervas ha'aretz, the nakedness of the land. Who was the king? Pharaoh. Paro in Hebrew comes from the word oref, neck. Am kashay oref, a stiff-necked people, the Jewish are called. The word oref is a neck. Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt, etymologically, the root of his name is the oref. And the reason is because when Moshe came to extract the Jewish people out of Egypt, Pharaoh said, "Who is this God that you're talking about? Li Yaori va'ani asisini. This river, I made it. I'm the God of Egypt. Which God are you talking about?" So if you want, Pharaoh is the anti-God. Pharaoh is the one that turned his neck, his back on God. The nakedness of the land is the sheer crass nature of the external, turning one's back completely on the true divine reality. A person can walk through and journey through life like that. God made that possible. It is astonishing that he created such a world where permission is given to travel through life and in fact deny his existence. And yet, the exodus of Egypt, the breaking of Pharaoh with the 10 plagues, was a systematic turning of Pharaoh's head. First, after the first few plagues, the Egyptians said, "Etzba Elohim he." Wow, this is the finger of God at work. And finally, Pharaoh himself said, "Hashem Hatzadik." He came to realize that God exists and in fact is conducting and can manipulate the world as in the 10 plagues. And finally, the Jewish people exit from this prison, something which was impossible. And then they come to the Red Sea, and Pharaoh has this change of mind, chases after them with 600 chariots, and is finally drowned in the Red Sea, according to one opinion. According to another opinion, he was the sole survivor, and later on went to become the king of Nineveh. And it was to there that Jonah the prophet was sent to call upon the people to do teshuvah, and hence the turning of the neck of Pharaoh was complete. The Jewish people were sunken in this land, 49 gradations of tumah, of impurity. And in fact, in the first 49 days after the Exodus, they had to climb out of these 49 gates of impurity each day, counting towards the giving of the Torah at Sinai. And what they were doing was drawing from above something which picked them up of the quagmire, so that when they stood at Sinai, they were ready to receive. Because a receptacle is empty. A receptacle is ready to receive. Moshe kibel Torah. Moshe received the Torah because he was the greatest receptacle. If you want to receive something, you need to make space for it. I think it was the Rebbe of Kotsk who was once asked, "Where is God?" And he answered, "Wherever you let him in." We have so much in between our ears, so much fuzz spinning around our minds. Where is God? We need to make space. We need to let God in. So the first step is to go out of Egypt. The Hebrew word Mitzrayim, meaning Egypt, comes from the word Meitzar Ugvul, limitations. Because the first thing Egypt does is creates barriers to that exodus. Intellectual, emotional, social, all sorts of barriers that encase a person within the material casket, not allowing a person to exit. That needed a miracle to take them out. And then they rose to the experience of Sinai. And then we're ready to journey to Eretz Yisrael. Why is a land called Eretz? Because it comes from the word ratzon, meaning desire. Eretz Yisrael is a land of Israel. What does the word Israel mean? Yisrael. We have in the episode of Jacob fighting with the angel, he had a name change from Yaakov, Jacob, to Yisrael. Ki sarisa im Elokim va'anoshim va'tucho, because you have prevailed. The word sar in Hebrew means a minister, like a minister in the Knesset is called a sar. Sarisa means to prevail over, to control. Because if you take control and you allow the ratzon, the desire of Hashem, to come to the fore, this becomes a land that desires to do the will of its maker. Now, land is earthly. Land represents the material. Where you have a land that desires to do the will of its maker, it means even in earthly matters, it desires to be in sync with the desire of its maker. So the journey from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael is in fact a life journey for each one of us. It's the journey from the position of incarceration within boundaries, within limitations, within peer pressure, social mores, intellectual lack of comprehension or knowing better, emotional rejection, distance, lack of feeling, to a place where there's connection, where there is complete sync with the divine. That took the Jewish people through a desert. a desert which the only thing that inhabited that desert was Nachash, Saraf, Va'akrov, snakes and scorpions. A desert is a very unfriendly place. A desert is a place where there's no life. The only life that there is dangerous life. The land of Israel, in contrast, is luscious, it's beautiful, it's bountiful. So when you contrast this desert and you contrast this beautiful land, when you travel through this desert, you're dealing with very difficult opponents. What does that mean spiritually? The Kabbalah explains that the reason why the Jewish people had to travel through the desert was in order, and I'll use the Kabbalistic expression, lahachnia hachitzonim, in order to humble the outer forces. Let me explain. In Kabbalah, you only have two sides. You have what's called the Sitra Dikdusha, the side of holiness, and then you have the Sitra Achra, which means the other side, the side of unholiness. And that side of unholiness has various klipos in it. A klipa means a peel. It's the Kabbalistic word for evil, because evil is necessary in order to maintain free choice. God needed to create evil in the world in order that man should have free choice and thereby be rewarded by choosing life and good. But on the other hand, just like a peel which is discarded, similarly, klippas need discarding. But they're also a creation. Where do they get their life force from? Kabbalah explains that there is a concept called yenika lechitzonim, nourishment given to the outer forces. At the end of the day, they must also exist. So in terms of will, you have what's called pnimiut haratzon, the inner will, and chitzoniot haratzon, the outer will. So for example, when you engage in business, the idea is when you're buying and selling, you're not so much interested in the object of sale or purchase. What you're interested in more is the profit which will feed you and your family. So the pnimiut haratzon, the inner desire, is the money that you're making from the deal. The chitzoniot haratzon, the outer desire, is dealing with the various mediums which will provide that income. As we travel through the world, the biggest threat to ourselves is our own ego. The biggest threat to ourselves is our own self-centeredness. The biggest threat to ourselves is our own, what we call our own Yetzer Hara. That is our greatest enemy. And sometimes it comes in forms of a snake and a scorpion. It can sting and it can kill. And the way to deal with it is to humble it. When the Jews traveled through the desert and they set up the tabernacle, in each one of these 42 places, they humbled a level of the klipa, of the forces of externality. Why 42? In the psyche, as we've explained, a human being is created in the image of God. Nase Adam b'tzalmenu kidmuseinu. Now, God, as we've explained, doesn't have any image or form, but rather within the human being is reflected the infrastructure of how God created the worlds, specifically in the form of the 10 Sephirot. The 3 intellectuals of Chachma, Bina, and Dat in their mind, and the 7 Midot of Chesed, kindness, Gvura, severity, Tiferet, compassion, Netzach, victory, Hod, submission, Yesod, connection, and Malchut, kingship, in the rest of the body. Although actually Malchut is the mouth, because a king reigns by word of his mouth. Now we say in davening every single day, Lecha Hashem, Hagadula, V'Hagavura, V'Hatiferet, V'Hanetzach, V'Hahod. We say, to you, Hashem, should be all these midot. So if you count them up, there are, in fact, the midot of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. Those collectively in Kabbalah are called Ze'er Anpin, small faces. Zo, in short. The last Sphira, Malchut, is how the Sphirot manifest outside a person. So if we're just going to deal with the midot, the character traits within the person, then we're dealing with 6 of them. Each one of the 6 has all 7 of them inside. So Chesed has inside it Chesed of Chesed, Gevura of Chesed, Tiferet of Chesed, Netzach of Chesed, Hod of Chesed, Yesod of Chesed, and Malchut of Chesed. In other words, there's inclusivity in the Midot itself. 7 times 6 is 42. And the 42 journeys of the desert are the elevation of each one of the Midot up within Seichel, within the mind. This is the idea of raising the emotions to be enveloped within and controlled by the mind. In simple language, we call it Moach Shalit al Alev, mind over heart. This elevation through 7 times 6, 42, are the 42 journeys. It's interesting. There was a great sage called Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakona. He actually wrote a prayer in our Siddur called Ana B'Choyach. It has 7 sentences made of 6 words. And if you put the whole 42 package together, it actually makes one of the names of God called the Shem Mem Beis, the 42 number of Hashem's name. That is always said before our souls are elevated, which is why the tefillah of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakona Ana B'Choyach is said in Shacharit before we start prayer, and just before we go to sleep, when we read the Shema before we go to bed, and our souls are elevated whilst we are sleeping, we also say that prayer. It's said before any form, if you want, of elevation. Because the 42 journeys, which by the way, there are also 42 words in the Shema, from the word Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, until the word uvisha arecha, there are 42 words. The 42 words of the Shema also express the elevation within the meditation of the first verse, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Because when we meditate in that first verse, which doesn't just mean there's one God and not two gods, but that verse means that everything is created by God, and God creates the entire creation, something from nothing, every single second, and pumps divine creative energy into the cosmos. And if he were for an instant to withdraw that creative energy, the world would cease to exist. Meditation in that level of unity, which is called Yichuda Ilah, the higher level of unity, which, by the way, was the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe was min hamayim mishitihu. He was drawn from the water. Note that he's not called Mashui in the past tense, the one that was drawn out, but he is called Moshe, the one that draws out, because Moshe and Aharon, as we say at the beginning of this week's Parsha, these are the journeys of the Bnei Yisrael that went out of Mitzrayim through the hand of Moshe and Aaron. They are two of the 7 shepherds of Israel who nourished the Jewish people with faith and knowledge. That is the job of a Moshe. The job of a Moshe, and it says in the Zohar, Tikkunei Zohar, the Ispashtusa de Moshe, the extension of Moshe in every single generation, because there is a spark of Moshe embodied in the leader of every generation, and in fact, a micro spark embodied within every single Jew. That spark is the level of comprehension and feeling of Yehuda Ilah, that there is nothing else besides godliness. Now, when a person comprehends that level, then the goal is to take the 6 midot of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and as they are inclusive of all the other 7 Sfirot, 7 times 6, and elevate them into Hashem. So let me give you an example of that. What does it mean? L'cha Hashem Hagdula. To you, Hashem is Chesed. Chesed is kindness. That's how externally it manifests. Internally, love. I can love God. I can also love pizza. I can love doing good things. I can love doing bad things. Ve'ohavta es Hashem Elokecha. You should love your Lord your God. B'chol levavecha. In Hebrew, the Hebrew word for a heart is a leiv. Grammatically, if you said your heart, you should say libecha. Why does it say levavecha? With both your hearts? Says the Talmud, bishnei yitzarecha. You need to love God both with your yetzer tov and with your yetzer hara, and with your evil inclination. You have to ride tandem. How's that possible? How do you persuade your yetzer hara, the base side of you, to come on board and be attached to godliness? That's a journey. The answer is through communication. That is what davening is all about. It's about talking to yourself and communicating to your darker side that it shouldn't remain dark anymore, but rather it should be illuminated with the light of your soul, the light of the Torah, and transformed. The transformation of darkness into light and bitterness into sweet. That is what is meant by the desire of God to have an abode in the lowest of all realms. The lowest of all realms is a person's animal soul. That's the lowest of all realms in the sense that it is essentially, naturally, animalistic, self-centered, and egocentric. And yet, when the godly soul embraces the animal soul, which, by the way, Kabbalistically has a higher source than the godly soul, in the sense that that which is higher fell lower. And as we've discussed in previous classes, that before the world was created, there was a prototype of a world called Tohu, the world of chaos. And it's from there that there was Shviras HaKelim, the breakage of the vessels, which is the Kabbalistic genesis of evil, sparks falling from that prototype down into this world and creating havoc in the form of external forces, chitzonim, the snakes, scorpions. Nevertheless, when one takes those and transforms them, when one takes negative loves, undesirable loves, and embraces them and the powers within them and transform them to kedusha, to holiness, that's a journey. That is L'cha Hashem Hagdula, taking chesed, kindness, love, of the negative kind and riding it in tandem with holiness, so that a person's investment in this world, both in their spiritual endeavors and in their mundane earthly endeavors, is infused with holiness. This is what our sages says when they said, Kol ma'asecha l'shem shamayim, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven, and even more, b'chol dorochecha dayehu, you should know God in all your ways. It doesn't mean to say that one should know God only when putting one's tefillin on, or when in shul, but it means that even when you're on vacation, riding a bike on a mountainside, you should also know God then. It's a form of spiritual intimacy, that wherever and whenever there's cognizance, there is know, before whom you are standing. Now, let me introduce you to another Kabbalistic concept. Hair. What is a hair? A hair grows out of the head, or in a man, out of the chin. A hair, it can be cut. A sheep. In Hebrew, a rochel is the Hebrew word, one of the Hebrew words for a sheep. A keves, a rochel, a ewe. It can be sheared. Its fleece comes off. You can make garments from it. The concept of a sar, a hair, is that it grows out of the body. It's part of the body, but it can be detached from the body. You can make clothes out of it. A rochel, a lamb, or ewe, it can grow, if you want, hairs, and thereafter it's sheared. And from those shears, you make garments. What is this idea in Kabbalah? The word sar, or sa'arot, hairs, are used extensively in Kabbalah to denote symptom, contraction. The idea of taking huge forces and contracting them, because inside every follicle of the hair, there is a tiny bit of the original, but it's so negligible, even when it's detached, it doesn't hurt. You can cut the hair off and it doesn't hurt. So if we want to have a look at the genesis of the worlds, we said that the highest world is the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation. The lowest sephira in Atzilut is called Malchut. Malchut, we said, is correlated in the human body with the peh, the mouth. Because words are a contracted form of thought. In fact, those words that come out of the mouth are often thought of in terms of hairs. It's interesting that Malchut is a feminine sephira because it receives from the upper sephirot, it becomes pregnant and gives birth to the lower world. And hence Malchut is a feminine sephira. Sar, which is hair, which grows out of Malchut, on the one hand can be the source for a Yenika Lachitzonim, meaning that where you have contraction, where you have symptom, where you have concealment, that can be a place where there is nourishment for the Sitra Achra, for the side of unholiness. That explains Kabbalistically why Sa'ar Be'isha Erva, hair for a married woman, is considered an erva, that women cover their hair, married women cover their hair. In the revealed part of the Torah, the idea is a form of tznius, the idea of modesty, the idea that she is a married woman. But Kabbalistically, when we look at human beings, we don't look at them just in their physical states. We look at them in their spiritual roots. The woman represents Shekhinah. She represents the manifestation of the divine within. She represents the Sephira of Malchut, and consequently hairs of the head, which are, by the way, different than hairs of the beard. They have a different Kabbalistic connotation. By a woman is considered an erva, because there can be from that a nourishment to chitzonim. Let me just explain that concept a little more. You don't want to give nourishment to the forces of impurity. You don't want to nourish those bad character traits within. The way to fight them is to introduce humility. When we open the ark every Shabbat in the synagogue, we sing the words, Vayehi b'nesaya ha'aron, and when the ark traveled, Vayoma Moshe has said, Kuma Hashem v'yofutzu oivecha, rise Hashem, may your enemies be scattered. And then when we put the Sefer Torah back, or Vanucha Yoma, when he rested, we says, Shuv Hashem, return Hashem. What is this concept? When the ark traveled, when the people traveled with the ark in the desert, it was the ark that caused the humiliation and the eradication of the powers of externality. Because when you have the ark, you have the testimony and you have the connection to what is inside the ark, the tablets of stone, the Sefer Torah, and hence they're called the Luchot HaBrit, the tablets of the covenant between God and Jewish people, the Brit. So one of the things which we avoid, like the plague, is giving any nourishment to the side of unholiness. That's why it's so important to negate ego. And it's extremely important to introduce bittul meaning complete nullification of self. That doesn't mean dissolution of self. That doesn't mean to say that one doesn't exist. What it means is that one sees oneself quite simply as a servant of the divine, as an eved. In other words, I'm here to serve. What I have is a gift, faculties, everything has been given to me as a gift. Life is a gift. Every day is a gift. And what I do with it is extremely, extremely important, because that gift is only given in this world. Movement, journeying is only in this world. Angels are called stationary. Souls move. This world is the marketplace. You can buy, sell, you can move. In the world to come, it's stationary in the sense that what you bring with you from this world, that's what you have. And by the way, there's a concept of jealousy in that world, that when a person passes on to the next world and sees what they possibly could have achieved in this world, they kick themselves. It's very painful, actually, then to realize what an opportunity one had, which one missed. And when one sees others who did take the opportunity and the bounty that they receive, it's an extremely painful thing to realize that one had such a golden and precious opportunity, which one missed. So, every day we go through a journey. We say at the beginning, the tefillah of Rebbe Nechuni ben Akona, we realize that in order to rise and in order to move in this 42 journey step, we've got to take each one of our midot, of kindness, of severity, of compassion, of being victorious, of submission or admission, and of connection, communication. And each one of them, we have to sublime with all its detail to Hashem. That doesn't mean, as I said beforehand, that we don't exist. It means we do exist, but we're merely a conduit for the fulfillment of the divine will. That is the goal of the land of Israel, the land that desires to do the will of its maker. That's our journey in life towards the promised land. So we go out of Egypt and we go towards the promised land. We go out of a state where our necks are turned against God, we ignore God, and we move towards a state where we are completely in sync with the divine. What you want, Hashem, that's what I want. Batel ritzoncha mipnei ritzono. Nullify your will in the face of his will. You know, shortly, believe it or not, in about 2 months' time, we're going to come to the Yomim Noraim, to the High Holy Days. There's a beautiful insight given by the Alter Rebbe that the whole year often we're standing back to back with God. We're very close, we're just looking in different direction. And the teshuvah, the return of those days of the High Holy Days, is quite simply, we just turn around. And when we realize how close we are, there's initial shock. Those are the days of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. But after the shock, there's embrace. Those are the days of Sukkot, when we are embraced in the sukkah. And then we dance together on Simchat Torah. In the miniature microcosm of the journey, every single day, and especially when we come to a Shabbat, which we read about these 42 journeys, we need to realize that in order to vanquish our snakes and scorpions, in order to get out of a desolate place where there's no man that's ever dwelt, we need to bring the ark. We need to bring daily Torah study. We need to bring daily prayer connection. We need to bring daily sinking of our midot with Hashem, not allowing ourselves to grope in the darkness of ego, but illuminating that darkness with the Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, with the candle of God, which is the soul of man. Let me try and wrap everything up. Eila Massei. These are the journeys. In historical terms, this isn't just the journey of every Jew or the journey of the Jews in the desert, but it's a national journey of our people going out of Egypt and eventually coming to the coming of Mashiach. And every single stage in that journey is part of the journey through the desert of the nations. And we're holding now right at the end. We're holding now at a position where we perhaps aren't the minds that were once, aren't the hearts that was once. But there's one thing that we do possess in this generation, and that is we possess the midah, the characteristic of netzach, of being victorious. And the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation, has expended all the oitzros, all the storehouses to nourish and to feed the Jewish people today with extraordinary pride in our Judaism and knowledge, has given us contemporary language, knowledge, understanding, and connection, that we can take the most mundane things in life and infuse them and elevate them and connect them with holiness in our relationships. When man and woman get together in holiness, in the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, keeping the mikveh laws, they take something which is sometimes abused, something which is sometimes viewed as mundane, outside of the realm of holiness. But no, they infuse that with tremendous holiness, sinking together body and soul, heaven and earth, spirituality and physicality in a perfect blend, and elevating the world and preparing it for a world in which, in the words of Maimonides, like we just finished his beautiful magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah, with the words, the world will be full of the knowledge of the God, like the waters covers the sea. And in those days, our goal will be to comprehend and to know the Almighty according to the capability of the human mind. This is a journey which each one of us needs to embark on a daily basis. We need to know where our goal is. We need to know that what we're out to achieve is to sync our mind, heart, desires, pleasures with those of Hashem, We need to know that our minds need to be full of Torah. Our hearts full of love for a fellow Jew. Our hands conduits for kindness and chesed. Our feet running to do a mitzvah. And not living out of the world, but living very much in the world on that journey towards the Holy Land, to the land that desires the physical abode, that knows and desires that it wishes to create an abode for God down here in this world, culminating in that era when the entire world will be engaged in that process. Thank you very much.
What a beautiful way to start the week, learning the deeper meanings of the week's Parsha. Thank you, Rabbi Dubov. It was absolutely beautiful to listen.